Okay, let's just a couple more words about the collection of imprecatory psalms. But I think I mentioned this before. We're probably speaking to an audience. These are addressed to an audience, to people who have experienced the horrors of exile and war. Perhaps they've been displaced. They're experiencing injustice. They're longing for some kind of justice to be demonstrated. They're experiencing implications of being in the minority, and perhaps, in those kinds of situations. So live nerve type psalms are there and real and need to be brought into that kind of context as they're approached for teaching and preaching. So yes, we're still supposed to pray for our enemies. You might think of that as even an advancement in terms of the theology. What Jesus has done and even made more clear at the cross. This is victory over these things. And because of what he's accomplished and what God accomplished, we have the freedom to pray for our enemies, even more. So this side of the cross, this kind of an advancement, I think, with the Matthew passage that we looked at. But I think personal vengeance is still not the option for us. So there you go. So let's talk about some of the theology, bigger ideas that emerge out of the Psalms. As a result of singing through the Psalms, what kind of big theological ideas might we land across? So the first one is interesting, and it starts right in with Psalm number 1. So let's turn there, and we'll look at that as kind of a Psalm 1 and 2 are oftentimes thought of as the introduction to the whole book of Psalms, the whole collection of Psalms. And it's interesting that, coming back, I know I keep doing it, the idea of the bookends that we see in the entire, remember I make the case for the bookends idea from passages in Zechariah 14 all the way back to Genesis 1 and 2. The authors have a clear idea of God as king. That's the big idea. And then you've got the idea of the image of God bearing as it's related to the name. His name is one name, one reputation, and the idea of life and blessing. Those are some big ideas that come through when we look at all of the Old Testament from beginning to end. But what we have in Psalm 1 is an interesting connection to this train, this theological train. And I'm going to make that connection for you right now in Psalm 1. So let's just look at it. It's a common psalm. I'm sure maybe some of you have even memorized it. So it says, "How blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, stand in the path of sinners, sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law, the Torah of the Lord. And in his Torah he meditates day and night. He will be like a tree firmly planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season. Its leaves do not wither, and whatever he does, he prospers." Contrast, the wicked are not so. They are like chaff which the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. But the Lord, or for the Lord, knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. So this, even in the beginning of Psalms, the very first Psalm, we see this meditation and reflection. And we see some similar imagery going on. If we remind ourselves, let's turn to Ezekiel chapter 47. We looked at some of these things when we discussed the day of the Lord and what the Lord will be coming to do with regards to his establishment of his rulership. And on the day of the Lord, this is going to happen in chapter 47. And you have these, the water that's coming from here, the temple, and it's flowing out. And the picture is, as you've seen this before in Ezekiel 47, this river forms and gets bigger and bigger. And on every side of the river are what? You see the Verse 12 in chapter 47. And by the river on its bank, on one side and on the other, will grow all kinds of trees for food. Their leaves will not wither, and their fruit will not fail. And I think that comes from Psalm 1. They will bear every month because their waters flow from the sanctuary, and their fruit will be food for food, and their leaves for healing. So this connects to Revelation 22 in the New Testament, in the same picture on the day of the Lord. That is a flowing from the throne when God sits as king and rules, the extension of his throne will be life and healing and blessing to the nations. These trees are growing, and the fruit that they produce provides and extends life and healing to the nations. So what we're supposed to meditate on in Psalm 1, you see, is this experience of meditating on the word of the Lord connects us to this idea of being like one of those trees. Do you see that in verse 3? What's the byproduct of this meditation? He, the one who's worshiping, the one who's meditating, will be like a tree firmly planted by streams of water. The trees will be yielding fruit in their season. The leaves do not wither, and whatever he does will be good and prosper. So my mind went back to Deuteronomy 17, 14 through 20, where when Moses was instructing the king to do this very meditating kind of thing. Do you remember? Deuteronomy 17 is another connection point that I think it's important to make. And one of the things that the king should do with regards to the Torah, if you remember, Moses taught, and it shall be with him, verse 19, he shall read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to fear the Lord his God by carefully observing all the words of the Torah, these statutes, so that his heart may not be lifted up above his countrymen, and that he may not turn aside from the commandment to the right, to the left, in order that he, his sons, may continue long and prosper in the kingdom in the midst of Israel. So it's interesting if King David, although he's not attributed to this psalm, what if he's the author, right? Or at least very much in charge of or responsible for its production. He wants it to be number one, the very front and center in this collection of psalms. Let's start with the bookend idea, King David says. So, he's got this long-term vantage point. He understands that the significance of God as king. Maybe he's had a little bit of time to reflect on some of these long-reaching ideas and implications, right, that come from the Davidic covenant, the covenant that God made with him as king. And the promise is that there's going to be a day when God will be king and rule, and this one who comes will come from his line to rule and reign and establish shalom, and blessing and life will be extended. The Garden of Eden will be opened up again. Access to the tree of life in some way will be now extended to the whole world. So I'm just wondering if this psalm is intended to kind of connect in that way to some of these typically known as prophetic ideas. We only look at them when we read the prophets, but I'm seeing a lot of connections in the nooks and crannies of what we're looking at here with regards to these big ideas. So now what we have here is Psalm 2. Let's look at that psalm. And it also brings in some interesting ideas with regards to this thing that we're looking at. Let me see. Ryan, why don't you read for us in Psalm 2 with a good, robust, strong acting voice? And I would, yeah, it's a good one. We're going to look at it.
Why are the nations in an uproar, and the peoples devising a vain thing? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, Let us tear their fetters apart, and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs, the Lord scoffs at them. Then he will speak to them in his anger, and terrify them in his fury, saying, But as for me, I have installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain. I will surely tell of the decree of the Lord. He said to me, You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will surely give the nations as your inheritance, and the very ends of the earth as your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron, you shall shatter them like earthenware. Now therefore, O kings, show discernment. Take warning, O judges of the earth. Worship the Lord with reverence and rejoice with trembling. Do homage to the Son, that he might not become angry, and you perish in the way. For his wrath may soon be kindled. How blessed are all who take refuge in him.
All right, thank you very much. So now it's interesting. This psalm, Psalm 2, seems to have a lot of conversation going back and forth between kings. And we kind of need to break this down a little bit. I would argue that there's three sets of kings that are being referred to in this one psalm. And here's how I break it down. You've got verses 1 through 3, and you see that there it's the focus on the nations and the kings of the earth. So those are earthly kings, the first group. And these kings are in rebellion in verses 1 through 3. That's kind of what we see being unpacked there. Kings who are in rebellion, verses 1 through 3. So these are earthly kings. And then in verse 4 and 5, he who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. That's God as king. Verse 4 and 5, God as king, and he's on his throne. That's from his vantage point. So that's verses 4 and 5. And then verse 6, God from his throne speaks about another earthly king and the establishment of his throne on Zion. That's verse 6. He speaks, but as for me, I have installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain. Okay, verse 6. And that king, the one who is on his throne in Zion, speaks in verse 7. It's a little tricky, doesn't it? Verse 7, he says, the one who's installed on Zion. Here's what he says. I will surely tell of the decree of the Lord. He said to me, Thou art my son. Today I have begotten thee. That's what he says. And then the heavenly king speaks to the king who's on his throne in Zion in verses 8 and 9. He says, Ask me, I'll surely give the nations as your inheritance, and the very ends of the earth as thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron, thou shalt shatter them like earthenware. And then finally, the heavenly king addresses back, now there's a reference back to the kings of the nations. So God on his throne is now addressing the kings of the earth in verses 10 through 12. So there's a lot of conversation there going on between the kings of the earth, God as king on his throne, and this new idea of another earthly king installed at Zion on his throne. Now what I think we have here is this Psalm 2 is going to bring more theological attention to the Davidic covenant. This is a coming king from the Davidic covenant. We know that there's going to be a king who's going to come and sit and rule at this place called Zion. And when that happens, according to the combination of Psalm 1 and 2, now we have the full picture. It's when that king sits and establishes his kingdom and his throne that all of the activity of this life and this water flowing and the trees that are growing and the establishment of healing and blessing and life to the nations, all of that will take place. So I think we read Psalm 1 and Psalm 2 together. What we have is this whole picture of the eschatological future that's coming because of the Davidic covenant and all of the promises that God has made, going all the way back to God's original promise to Abraham, that through you, all of the nations of the earth will be blessed. When's that going to happen? Read Psalm 1 and 2 and you'll find out. Well, we don't have does it need a king? Yeah, there's going to be a king. And here's the punchline. It seems, let's see, I don't want to jump ahead of myself a little bit. This forever king, this idea, is clear in the Psalm 1 and 2 combination here that we just saw. There's a king who will be sitting on his throne. And if we remind ourselves, let's go back to 2 Samuel chapter 7 and just pick up a couple of these places where I think there's got to be some connection going on. 2 Samuel chapter 7, and we covered this earlier this semester. But in the reflection, David's reflection after the prophet Nathan gave and delivers the oracle, we see in verse 18 in chapter 7. David the king went in and sat before the Lord, and he said, "Who am I, O Lord? What is my house that you have brought me this far?" David says, "And yet this was an insignificant thing in your eyes, O Lord God, for thou hast spoken also of the house of thy servant concerning the distant future." And this is the little Hebrew there says, "This is the Torah of humanity, O Lord God." And again, what more can King David say to thee? For you know thy servant, O Lord God. And then we go into all of the established my kingdom forever and your people forever and from the nations and blah, blah, blah. And all of this about the future. So this distant future, I think what we have in Psalm 1 and 2 is the beginnings of the unpacking of more of the picture that's being painted of this distant future, this future time, this day, the day of the Lord. And we have it in the Psalms right here. And the connection there that I see, if you saw that word that I translated the Torah of humanity, in 2 Samuel 7:19, take a look at verse 7 in chapter 2, Psalm chapter 2, verse 7. David says, I think, "I will surely tell of the decree of the Lord." The Hebrew word decree, you might think of it as the idea of the statute, is covenantally related. It's the same idea. I think there's a connection there between the Torah of humanity, which is made up of statutes and decrees, all of those statutes and decrees of Moses, commands, statutes, decrees. It's that basic family of language that basically refers to the individual components that make up the Torah, the teaching of Moses. I think the psalmist here, I think if it's David or David's overseeing its writing, verse 7, "I will surely tell of the decree of the Lord." That's the decree he's talking about. The one that he got from the oracle from Nathan, the Davidic covenant. He's expanding on it now in theological song, I think. So, and he's laying the foundation in Psalm 1 and 2 for all of the further expansion that's about ready to take place for the singing church. So I think that's what we have going on. The Torah and statute is a good connection there. All right. And the answer, he's going to begin to answer the question. In this psalm, we have the answer. Who is this king going to be? All right. So now we have to think about, so we've got this conversation going on between three groups of kings in Psalm 2. Kings of the earth. We've got the king who's on his throne speaking to another king he's establishing on this throne in Zion, who he's calling his son. All right? So this king here, this earthly king who's sitting in Zion on his throne, he's not just a son of man, but he's a son of God. You see that? He's not just a son of man. He's a son of God too. So that might be, wow, that's an aha moment. It's interesting that this psalm establishes here that the king who's here is addressing this king as his son. But yet he's an extension of that king. He's not just a son of man, not just a man, but now he's more than just a man. He's a son of God as well. So this is "Thou art my son, today I have begotten thee." So there's a significant theological advancement there made with our understanding of who this king's going to be. Not just an earthly king, he's going to be so much more than that. And this was all part of the singing, worshiping church in places like Bethlehem. Faithful communities around the kingdom. were reflecting on these things and singing about it so that they can understand it, and it would give them hope for the future, just like it does up for us. This is a day that we're waiting for. We've seen one aspect of it and what God accomplished at the cross, but we're still looking forward to more. And that's our vantage point. Yeah.
Is there anybody besides David that we think could have given this prophecy?
Or this song? Well, I think it's not attributed to him, but I think it's closely associated with him. I think he's probably when you have the prophet Nathan whack you on the head with the Davidic covenant, you never recover. You're going to, and David has a special relationship with the Lord from the beginning, all of his life. So I it's easy for me to see. What was your question? Other than David?
If there was anybody else we possibly could attribute this to.
Oh, I don't want to get into an argument over authorship. I think it has strong David look and feel, this particular psalm. I think the Lord is continuing to unpack the significant aspects of the Davidic covenant, early in the monarchy and all the way through. So if this psalm is early on in the Davidic kingdom, I think it's intentional and it's up front and center. It was one of the first, David's launching this project as a king. So it's important to him. And, so after the Davidic covenant was established, he's off and running with this. So yeah. All right, well, let's keep going. And that's the point that I make. I come back to this picture and understand it. It's profound and, interesting to me anyway that, this was all part of the singing, worshiping church of the day. We can identify with that and understand these psalms were being used and understood and were meaningful and were helpful for establishing a theological foundation for the faithful community at that time. David attends a church like this or like this, and pastor says, "Hey, we have a special guest today. David, what song would you like to sing today?" And he'd say, "Psalm 2, it's my favorite," something like that. Here's something that I want to show you. I think I mentioned it briefly before, but the significance of this theological foundation being laid in the little nooks and crannies of the kingdom like this. This is just something, I make this connection. The prophet Micah grew up in a town not very far from Bethlehem, and you see it, Moresheth. You see how close it is to Bethlehem, and there's Jerusalem. So in this little area, this little pocket of the southern kingdom of Judah, Moresheth, this is all speculation. Very possible, though, Moresheth would be a very similar town to a town like Bethlehem, where you've got a faithful community. People are having church, and there are Boazes walking around Main Street doing it right, helping lead the way, making good decisions, and being faithfully covenant. And then we turn to Micah chapter 4, the prophet Micah, who grew up in Moresheth. Let's turn there to Micah. There's a couple significant things that come out. Yeah. And you have the prophet Micah, in his prophetic encouragement, says this to the faithful community: "And it will come about in the last days that the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains. It will be raised above the hills, and the peoples will stream to it. And many nations will come and say, 'Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord,'" that's Zion, "and to the house of God, to the God of Jacob, that he may teach us about his ways, and so that we can meditate on them," like Psalm 1 that we just got done singing about, "and that we may walk in his paths, for from Zion will go forth the Torah, even the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He'll judge between many peoples, render decisions for mighty distant nations. They'll turn their hammers they'll hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they train for war. Each of them will sit under his vine and under his fig tree, with no one to make them afraid, for the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken." This is the day of the Lord language. We keep coming back to this passage, and it talks about when the king sits on this throne and these things happen. And then Micah even goes further. In Micah chapter 5, verse 1. Muster yourselves. Let's see, Micah chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. Now muster yourselves in troops. So if they ask the question now, Micah, who is this king? How will we know who he is? Micah says this. Muster yourselves in troops, daughter of troops. They have laid siege against us with a rod. They will smite the judge of Israel on the cheek. But as for you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, too little, population 600, to be among the clans of Judah, but from you one will go forth for me to be ruler in Israel. Psalm 2. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. Therefore he will give them up until the time. For when she who is in labor has borne a child, then the remainder of his brethren will return to the sons of Israel. And he, that is the one born, will arise and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord. Psalm 2. In the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, who's on the throne. And they will remain, because at the time he will be great to the ends of the earth. You see how it all connects? It's kind of fun to make these connections. And so we see God on his throne, the Mount Zion. Nations will come and receive blessing and instruction from the Torah. And we see the same, I call it the same small town impact that's being had on David the king, the psalmist, the theologian, who can't get over the fact that God's promised him something that's going to happen in the future. We have the prophets also probably growing up in church, and from Micah singing some of the songs from David. But then when the Lord gets a hold of him, when it's his time to step in and start communicating, he's going to do it on the foundation of the theology that's already been laid from the singing church. So I think it's kind of just trying to put feet to all of this, so you can encourage your people with this as well. All right? So let's talk about Solomon is also carrying the theological torch similarly to King David. Let's go back to the Psalms now and look at one of the Psalms, 72, which this is one of them that's attributed to him. And Solomon's also going to amplify the reality of this future coming king. What will this king do in Psalm 72? Let's see. Michael? Anthony? There you are. Could you read Psalm 72, verses 2 through 7?
2 through 7?
Yes.
You will judge your people with righteousness, and your afflicted ones with justice. May the mountains bring prosperity to the people, and the hills righteousness. May he vindicate the afflicted among the people, help the poor, and crush the oppressor. May he continue while the sun endures, and as long as the moon throughout all generations. May he be like rain that falls on the cut grass, like spring showers that water the earth. May the righteous flourish in his days, and prosperity abound until the moon is no more. So that's what the king will do according to Solomon here. And then verses 8 through 11, the extent of his rule. What's the extent of his rule and his kingdom? Let's see here. Caitlin, could we have you read in verses 8 through 11?
May he also rule from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. Let the nomads of the desert bow before him. Let the enemies lick the dust. Let the kings of Tarshish and the islands bring presents. The kings of Sheba and Seba offer gifts. All the kings bow down before him. Let all the nations serve him.
Okay, and then finally verses 17 through 19. Charles, up here, could we have you read 17 through 19 in terms of the fact that the king here will establish the name of the Lord forever? Verses 17 through 19.
May his name endure forever, his fame continue as long as the sun. May people be blessed in him, all nations call him blessed. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who alone does endures things. Blessed be his glorious name forever. May the whole earth be filled with his glory. Amen and amen.
Prayers of David, the son of Jesse, are ended. So that's kind of an ending psalm there to a little section that we identify it there with a postscript title there. All right. But you see what this psalm is doing here. Sometimes we can identify, now we're back to the idea of another kind of grouping of psalms that might be part of you might say, a different part of the songbook that would be written down at a different time and used for the encouragement. In Psalm 73 through 89, Psalm 73 through 89 seem to focus on a particular grouping of psalms and the conditions that are leading up to the fall of Jerusalem, and then the subsequent exilic experience for the faithful who are in Jerusalem at that time. So Psalms 73 through 89 seem conducive to that kind of historical context. As you read them, you'll see why. We'll look at just some bits and pieces of some here in a little bit. But you see, these Psalms, when you read them, you notice how they articulate or put into words themes like this. Psalm 74, for example, the devastation of the land by an enemy. It's all about that. Psalm 77, for example, talks about comfort in times of trouble. So you can understand these would be relevant themes that would have been important for an audience at this particular time in salvation history. Psalm 78, for example, talks about God's continual guidance for the faithful minority despite the unfaithfulness of the majority. Now that would have been a live topic for the faithful remnant coming out of Jerusalem. Why are we in this line? How did we get here? Excuse me? Did I get the wrong ticket? Get on the wrong train or what? A corporate lament, Psalm 79, another example, a corporate lament. This is the corporate lament idea over Jerusalem and its destruction. So after Jerusalem falls, now we've got songs that are being written to help the community grieve and get over that loss, which is interesting, Psalm 79. All right. Let's look at Psalm 84 in a little detail. Psalm 84. I like this one. So picture yourself in exile. You're part of the faithful remnant. You're in a strange land. Your temple's been destroyed. City, you've lost everything. You're trying to rebuild. And you miss home. Psalm 84, that's the context. Longing for worship. The thing that you miss the most in exile is the freedom that you have to worship in the temple, right? You can go to church. You can hang out with your spiritual friends and put focus on the Lord every other day or hour or however often you do that. So this is something that they're longing for in Psalm 84. Everybody see verses 1 and 2. Psalm 84, how lovely are thy dwelling places, O Lord of hosts. My soul longed and even yearned for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh sing for joy to the living God. You see that in verses 1 and 2. In exile, though, where do you have church? Maybe it becomes more apparent to you that it's not about the building, but it's about being in the presence of the Lord. And here we have some description of the court of the Lord. It's almost coming down out of heaven. Verse 3, the bird also has found a house, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may lay her young. Even thine altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God, for me. Kind of substitute. He's observing, and houses, the birds have their places to go, and they worship, but then, I have my place too. How blessed are those who dwell in thy house. They are ever praising thee. And then we pause because of the word Selah. And now Psalm 84 sounds like an echo from from our discussion on Psalm 1 and 2, verses 6 through 12. Passing through the valley of Baca, the idea is weeping, the valley of weeping. They make it a spring. Who makes it a spring? Where's this water come from? Who are they that are walking through this valley of weeping it, making it a valley of water and of spring? So a valley of dryness. How do you turn a valley of dryness into a valley of growth, where trees are growing on each side and whatever the source of water is coming? Well, we've already answered that question. Psalm 1, how blessed is the one who, from him shall, water shall spring forth, trees will grow, bearing fruit in its due season, all of that. That's how you survive exile, and that's how we turn a valley of weeping into a valley of springs. And the early rain also covers it with blessings. Verse 6, verse 7, they go from strength to strength. That's what we do when we're in exile, the faithful. Every one of them appears before God in Zion. Where do we get that strength? Psalm 2, we remind ourselves of who's king, who's on the throne, and that there's a coming one who's going to come. And he'll not only be a son of God, he'll be a son of man, but he'll also be he'll be an extension of God himself in some mysterious kind of way. And when he comes, he'll rule, and all of these things that will take place, the nations will stream to him, and they'll align themselves. Verse 7, verse 8, O Lord God of hosts, hear my prayer. Give ear, O God of Jacob. Behold our shield, O God, and look upon the face of thine anointed. For a day in thy courts is better than 1,000 outside. I would rather stand at the threshold of the house of my God than dwell in the tents of wickedness. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord gives grace and glory. No good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly. O Lord of hosts, how blessed is the man who trusts in thee. So it's an interesting psalm of encouragement. But you can picture that kind of psalm being sung to encourage and remind everybody in exile of how to reconnect with God in the right way, even though we can't go to the temple. Thankfully, the Babylonians are still letting us meet together and have church, though under supervision, kind of like the home church in China, under supervision and all of that. So, but it's Psalm 84. And when you teach these psalms or preach from these psalms, you want to always try to bring in that kind of a context. It really does help the psalms come alive for your congregation. All right, verse 5. Yeah, so the Zion idea, the king's coming from Zion. The book of Psalms will end, and as Psalms ends, let's see, this particular book, this collection of Psalms that we talked about, Psalm 89. Let's take a look at Psalm 89. And it's interesting, this particular group of Psalms, we're talking about this particular group of Psalms, Psalm 73 through 89. If it's true that they're kind of written to encourage this group that's not only experienced the exile, but are currently in exile, it's interesting where this group of Psalms ends with regards to its message of encouragement. That's the point I was trying to make. So we go to the very last psalm in this collection, Psalm 89, and we discover something that we probably would expect. Psalm 89, 1 through 4. I will sing of the loving kindness or the covenant loyalty of the Lord forever. To all generations I will make known thy faithfulness with my mouth, for I have said, covenant loyalty will be built up forever. In the heavens thou wilt establish thy faithfulness. I have made a covenant with my chosen. I have sworn to David, my servant. I will establish your seed forever and build up your throne to all generations. And now that you're all blown away, let's just pause and reflect. Selah. And you do that, and you just pause and reflect. You don't move on. Don't answer your phone. Don't check your texts. Just pause and reflect. No, that's what you do. Selah. And you see the focus there is on the Davidic covenant. So yeah, the faithful remnant needed to know and be encouraged that God's not through with them. He's got more agenda that's coming. It's our job to be faithful and wait for his perfect timing when all this is going to take place. Verses 20 through 24, you see this ongoing Davidic covenant theme woven through. I have found David my servant in verse 20. With my holy oil I have anointed him, with whom my hand will be established. My arm will also strengthen him. The enemy will not deceive him, nor the son of wickedness afflict him. But I shall crush his adversaries before him and strike those who hate him. And my faithfulness and my loving kindness will be with him. And in my name his horn will be exalted. Name and reputation, right? So that's and then finally the end verses 36. You see an ongoing focus on I will not lie to David. Verse 36. David, his descendants, his seed shall endure forever. So this language comes right out of 2 Samuel chapter 7. And his throne as the sun before me. It is established forever like the moon. And the witness in the sky is faithful. Selah. All right? So we have a lot of that going on. Out of this tragic and chaotic time, the faithful remnant was producing songs like this. So I can picture Bob Dylan, sitting on a street corner. A lot of people moping around, maybe feeling a little discouraged. Man, we've been here a while. What's going on? And Bob Dylan starts to pick up his guitar and sing one of these songs. He's writing an inspired song. And all of a sudden, that's really good. We're going to bring that in. That's a good song that really encouraged me. And, it becomes part of the inspired corpus of songs. So, it's the idea is some of the themes that come out of this group of Psalms. We may not have a king. We may not have a temple. But that's okay because it's all coming. There's a king who's coming. And when he does, he's going to reestablish his temple. And we'll have a place to worship again in his presence. So that's the way that those who are in exile have church. And it's not just any old king. It's not just an earthly king. It's not just a son of man, but it's going to be a son of man and a son of God, according to Psalm 2. So this is all coming through this difficult time. All right, another group of Psalms. We talked about the exilic group of Psalms. Now we have Psalms 90 through 106 that kind of form another little mini book within the whole book of Psalms. There's another theme here that's introduced in these Psalms. If you want to go focus on a group of Psalms and read them together, the big idea of these Psalms is God as King. Oh, we're back to this idea. So God as King is going to be focused. Let's turn to Psalm 95 and look at just some examples of these groups of Psalms. Psalm 95, verses 1 through 6. Let's see. Have I had Cole read? Cole. You haven't read yet. Let's have you read verse 1 through 6 in Psalm 95.
O come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout joyfully to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before his presence with thanksgiving. Let us shout joyfully to him with psalms. For the Lord is a great God, and a great King above all gods. In whose hand are the depths of the earth, the peaks of the mountains are also his. The sea is his, for it was he who made it, and his hands formed the dry land.
Okay. Yeah. And verse 6? Yeah.
Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker.
Yeah, so that's a great example, Psalm 95, of the theme of God who's on his throne and all of the implications of that. And while God is certainly on his throne all the time, these are the Psalms that recognize that and acknowledge that not only is he on his throne in heaven, but he's also eventually going to come and extend that rule on earth. And we see that in Psalm 96. Why don't you keep reading there, Cole, in Psalm 96, verses 9 through 13.
Psalm 96.
Yeah, Psalm 96, verses 9 through 13.
Worship the Lord in holy attire. Tremble before him, all the earth. Say among the nations, the Lord reigns. Indeed, the world is firmly established. It will not be moved. He will judge the peoples with equity. Let the heavens be glad and let the earth rejoice. Let the sea roar and all it contains. Let the field exult and all that is in it. Then all the trees of the forest will sing for joy before the Lord, for he is coming. For he is coming to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples in his faithfulness.
Okay, turn over to Psalm 99. There's some other ideas that are implications of this bigger idea of God as king. We have the emphasis on the king who's coming to establish his rule in Zion. This idea is also acknowledged in Psalm 99. You see, the Lord reigns. Let the people tremble. He is enthroned above the cherubim. Let the earth shake. The Lord is great in Zion, and he is exalted above the peoples. Let them praise thy great and awesome name. Holy is he. And the strength of the king loves justice. Thou hast established equity. Thou hast executed justice and righteousness in Jacob. Exalt the Lord our God and worship at his footstool. Holy is he. So this is an idea. Psalm 100, 1 through 5. The invitation here is to worship God as king, but this invitation is extended to the entire world here in Psalm 100. Shout joyfully to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful singing. Know that the Lord himself is God. It's he who has made us and not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving. Enter his courts with praise. Give thanks to him. Bless his name, for the Lord is good. His loving kindness is everlasting, and his faithfulness to all generations. And when he comes to rule, he will remember the faithful remnant wherever they are, wherever the exiles are, in Psalm 106. Tamara, could you read for us in Psalm 106, beginning in verse 45 through 48? Psalm 106, 45 through 48.
And he remembered his covenants for their sake, and relented according to the greatness of his loving kindness. He also made them objects of compassion in the presence of all their captors. Save us, O Lord our God, and gather us from among the nations, to give thanks to your holy name and glory in your praise. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, from everlasting even to everlasting. And let all the people say, Amen. Praise the Lord.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and take our next